Mashiach is the same word as Mashiach, but the aleph at the end means it's Aramaic. Okay? So if you ever see that word, Malka Mashiach, you know what it means. Number two, Ikvasa de Mashiach. You see the aleph at the end? Again, it's Aramaic. What does it mean? Ikvasa means the heel or the footstep, and Mashiach means of Mashiach. So what does that mean? What does that expression mean? The footsteps of Mashiach, the heel of Mashiach. Get Rachel. Right. This is a term that's used indicating when we're getting close to Mashiach. Just like when a person is coming towards your house, you don't see them, you can't see who it is, what it is, but you hear footsteps. So you know that if you can hear the footsteps, they got to be very close. So there's an expression that things happen in the world which are already the footsteps of Mashiach. Or another way of looking at it, just like the heel can mean footsteps or heel, two definitions. The heel is the lowest part of the body. So we say the heels of Mashiach means that we're at the lowest point already, that everything in the previous generation has been already done, and now we're up to the heels, which means we're up to the last thing that needs to be done to get us ready for Mashiach. What does number 3 mean? Yemois HaMashiach. The days of Mashiach. So the difference between that and Malka Mashiach is the person who is a king, and he is Mashiach. Yemois HaMashiach means the days, the era of Mashiach. Number 4, Kates. What does that mean? What? The end. The end of what? Right. It's a term that's used for the end of Gullus. It means there's a certain time. At this point, the Gullus is over. It's Kates. Number 5, Kibbutz Golius. Kibbutz. What? Yeah. Golius. You started off okay, and then you went off to exit. Kibbutz means group. It actually means gather together all the Jews that are spread all over the world. That's one of the things that Mashiach will do. Kibbutz Golius. Kibbutz means to gather together all the Jews of the diaspora to come together to Eretz Yisrael. Number 6, Tchias HaMesim. That's the resurrection of the dead. Number 7, Higias Mangu Laschem. Time of redemption has arrived. This is a term that's found in the Medrash, and the Rebbe quoted this, reiterated this many, many times when the outbreak of the Persian Gulf crisis, the Persian Gulf War. The Medrash says when you see a war in this location, this geographic location, you should know that this is a message. Higias Mangul Aschem. So it means the time of redemption has arrived. It means we're not yet in redemption, but the time of redemption has already arrived, and now things are just developing to be more complete. Number 8, Ben David. Who is that? Mashiach. Because Mashiach is the descendant of David HaMelech. A lot of people took that as a name. I don't know if you know people called Ben David. It's a last name, but it comes from here, and it means a descendant of King David. It's another name for Mashiach. Number 9, Becheskas Mashiach. This you can only know if you were here when we learned the Rambam at the beginning of the year. Basically, number 9 and 11 go together. Becheskas Mashiach means there are certain signs that you can assume that this person is Mashiach. We can't be absolutely sure that it'll come to fruition, but definitely we can assume that this person is Mashiach and he's on the way to redemption. But it might be reversed. Vade Mashiach, which means certain Mashiach. That's number 11. In other words, it's a point where this person who's Mashiach, who we assume to be Mashiach, has accomplished so much that at this point it's irreversible. It has to happen with absolute certainty. That's Vada Mashiach. These two things are explained at length and in depth in the Rambam, which we did in the beginning of the year. Number 10, anyone remember the term Yaakov Kol Yisrael? Well, you know what Kol Yisrael means, right? Kol Yisrael, all of Israel. What does Yaakov mean? Yaakov means, Rambam gives one of the criteria of this person whose Mashiach is, Yaakov Kol Yisrael. Yaakov means he will impose or inspire all of Israel to be observing Torah mitzvahs. Number 12, Anana Shmaya. What does Shmaya mean? You see there's an aleph at the end, but what does it sound like? Shmaya. What? Shemayim, heaven. And what's Anane? Ananim? Anan? Clouds. How does that relate to Mashiach, clouds of heaven? That is a source that says Mashiach will come flying in on a cloud. It's a metaphor, but that's the term Anana Shmaya. Number 13, we learned in this class just a few weeks ago, Geula Geula. What does that mean? Geula, what does Geula mean? Golos. What does it mean from what?
We're going through that just now.
Right, and what did we explain? That the same letters that constitute the word Geula constitute the word Geula. The difference is the aleph. Yeah.
You know how last week you gave us this news, like shortchanging our children by teaching them adoption literally? So when we're talking about how we're meant to take miracles literally, not as metaphorical,
Right.
How do we know that him coming on a cloud is a metaphor and not literally?
We don't. It could be literally.
But we allow ourselves the space to say it could be metaphorical.
No, because in Gemara, not halacha, but in Gemara, things could be, in the Medrash also, things could be literal and could be metaphoric. But what the article is bringing out is when a person says that it's hard to believe, it's embarrassing to think that it means literal, that means that the person is lacking faith in miracles. That was my point. If I say it's not literal because I have a proof from this or that or the other place, that's one thing. But if it's because I feel embarrassed and uncomfortable to say that I believe something so miraculous could happen, there's something wrong with my faith. But definitely, yes, anything in Medrash, generally speaking, could be literal or metaphor. Medrash is written that way. If you remember, I said the only place where there's no metaphors is halacha. You know, if it says in halacha, you have to do something at a certain time, you can't say, no, I can do whatever I want. The time is only a metaphor. No, Shabbos has to start exactly at this minute. And before, it's not Shabbos, and a minute later, it is Shabbos. Okay, so Geula Geula represents the idea that Geula is not, this is in one sentence, Geula, redemption, doesn't leave Golus, doesn't eliminate Golus, it transforms Golus. It takes everything along, it includes everything we achieved and everything we have, everything about us that's good comes along with us, but it has the aleph in it, and that brings redemption. So no one should be afraid that we're going to lose something when Mashiach comes. Possession, friends, contacts, careers, accomplishments, everything we have that's good will come along with us, but it'll be with the aleph in it. Number 14, Ad Mosai. That's the outcry to Hashem. Hashem, we're begging Hashem, how long will we be in Golus? What does this expression mean? Miyad hein negolin. It's very often used, especially in the Sikhs of the Rebbe. The source is from Rambam, Maimonides. So I'll tell you what it means. It means the Rambam writes that the Gemara promised us that at the end of Golus, there'll be a global movement of tshuva around the world. And once the Yidden do tshuva, miyad, immediately they will be taken out of Golus. So in other words, this is one of the things we say is a sign how our generation is the generation of Geula, because there never ever was in history, since the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed approximately 2,000 years ago, a global movement of tshuva the way we're witnessing today. And the Rambam writes, right after that, we will see miyad, which means right away, hey negolim, they will be redeemed. Okay. Number 16 and number 17. Ben Kuzibo or Bar Kochba. Any of the two names sound familiar? Right? So who is he? Anyone remember who Bar Kochba was? Rachel? Bar Kochba was the person that Rabbi Akiva and all the sages in his generation said that he is Mashiach in our generation. And he has the potential to bring redemption. It didn't come to fruition because the sins of the Yidden, they didn't merit, but he had the criteria to be Mashiach. So his name was, sometimes he's called Ben Kuziba, the same person. Sometimes he's called Bar Kochba. What, Miriam? Rabbi Akiva. What we didn't talk about is number 18, 19, 20, so I want to talk about it now. When Mashiach will come, it says there's going to be a big feast. So that feast should also be marked. If you want to go to number something, let me see which number. Number 50 in the sheet. Check that off. Su'udas Mashiach, which means the meal that we're going to have when Mashiach comes. Could also mean another thing. What else could it mean?
The one on Pesach.
Right. Achar Pesach, we eat a special meal. We call that also Su'udas Mashiach. But it says in Gemara and Medrashim, when Mashiach will come, there'll be a big meal. All the tzaddikim of the past will be there, and they'll all celebrate together. Now the meal, what will be the menu? What? Chicken. No, wrong.
A big whale and a big bowl.
Right. 18 is the whale, fish. 19 is the wine, and 20 is the meat.
Whales kosher.
Yep. I guess this whale is going to be a kosher whale.
Whales don't have the mammals, and they also don't have like scales.
Right. But this whale is a kosher whale. And it was prepared. Hashem sort of put it aside and prepared as when Mashiach comes, we'll eat this fish. And we'll drink wine. You know, wine, the older it is, the better it is. Even though I know some people complain, I had the wine standing in my house in a box for a few weeks and they went sour. And I thought when it's older, it's supposed to be better. So we're not talking about wine in the box or the bottle. It's the wine in the barrel. When they make the wine, the longer it stays there, the better it is. So this is wine that's also ancient wine. It's 5,781 years old. Hashem put aside wine for this feast. And the third thing is Sher Habar. There'll be a huge ox called Sher Habar, a wild ox. And that's the meat we're going to be eating. Hashem will have that slaughtered and we'll be eating that meat when Mashiach comes. Here we go again. Is this literal or is this figurative? It could be either. It could be figurative. It could be literal. But even if it's literal, they'll be eating this meat and eating this fish and drinking this wine. It would be very foolish of a person to think, "Wow, this is what we've been waiting for, to eat such meat that's so delicious that the best restaurant in the world could never produce such meat, and the best restaurant in the world could never produce such fish." That's what it's all about. That's what Golus was for. That's why we worked so hard. So obviously, all these three things in Chassidus, it explains what it represents in a deeper level. Again, even if it is something deep, it doesn't negate the physical. I'll give you an example, if I can use this example. Imagine somebody who won world championship in chess. Not championship in the United States, world championship in chess. He worked on this for years, and I was challenging other people, went from one to the other. Finally, he won world championship. What do they give him? What do they present him with? A trophy, world championship. He has this in his house. So if a child who is 6 years old would ask him, why did you get this? And he'll say, oh, because I won a game, I won championship. Do you think a 6-year-old has an understanding what world championship means? No. So what does he think? Oh, he had a game and he won the game. So they gave him this thing which shines. It's shiny. It's nice. It's a nice little thing. It shines it glitters in the sun. They can't understand the real meaning and the real value of this thing. And how much pride it brings to the person, how much pleasure it brings to the person that they won world championship. So when we say that this is much more than just a piece of metal, we're not negating that there's a physical piece of metal here, but we're saying there's more depth than just a physical metal. If a person brings a present to someone, a husband brings a present to his wife, or the wife brings a present to the husband, or a chassan to a kala, and they give a physical object, there's a physical object there, but the deeper thing is the emotion, the feelings of love that are invested in this physical act. So basically, there's going to be physical fish, and there'll be physical wine, and there'll be physical meat, but it's going to contain in it, and through it, there'll be a very high level of godly light that'll manifest. And that's why sometimes what we say spiritually doesn't negate that this thing won't happen physically, but it has more meaning to it. So that's 18, 19, and 20. Another thing we didn't talk about is number 21. Torah of Mashiach. What does that mean? The Torah of Mashiach, right? So what does that mean? So obviously Moshiach will be not only a king, he'll be also a great Torah giant. And he's going to teach Torah to the whole world. He's going to teach Torah to everyone, to all the tzaddikim. That means that all the righteous people, all the Torah giants that ever lived are going to come back, be alive again. And Moshe is going to teach them Torah. What's there to teach? They knew everything already. They knew the whole Torah. So I want to go into that a little bit. And Rachel, if I can bother you again, thank you. So it says, the Torah of Mashiach, another major innovation of Mashiach. I don't like to use the word messianic or Messiah, just doesn't have a pleasant connotation to me. So we'll keep using the word Mashiach. Another major innovation of Mashiach concerns Torah knowledge. Rambam rules, in those days of Mashiach, Yemos HaMashiach, knowledge, wisdom, and truth will increase because the Davidic king, which means the king who will be from the Davidic dynasty, that he will arise, will be wiser than Shlomo and a great prophet. In fact, approaching the prophetic level of Moshe, our teacher. Remember, we learned that there are many levels in prophecy. And Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a verse, a pasuk in the Torah that says that he was the greatest prophet that ever lived, and no prophet ever matched him in prophecy. So the Rambam writes that Mashiach will be close to the level of Moshe Rabbeinu in prophecy. In terms of wisdom, he'll be even greater than the wisdom of Shlomo, because Shlomo HaMelech, he was the wisest person that ever lived before and after. And Mashiach will be the exception. Accordingly, he will teach all the people and instruct them in the path of Hashem. Therefore, the Jewish people will be great sages, and they will know hidden matters. As Chazal say, this is a statement in the Medrash, that there's a verse, a pasuk in Yeshayahu, in one of the places in Navi. The Torah shall go forth from me. What does it mean the Torah will go forth from me? We've been having Torah all along. What are we saying? What? Someone said something? We've been having Torah all along. What's going to be unique about the time of Mashiach? So I just made a copy here so you can see the source. For Rachel, which is really going to be overworked today, if you don't mind. Okay. You know, when you're studying, you don't do too much exercise. So this is the good news. Again, the English translation, everyone translates it a little bit different, but you can see the Hebrew, where it's underlined on top of the page. This is a pasuk in Yeshayahu, in Isaiah. And it says, listen to me, that Torah me'iti tates, a Torah will come forth from me. So this is what we call the written Torah. The oral Torah, the Gemara says, what does it mean? After all, we already have the Torah. And the Gemara says, a new Torah shall come forth from me. Well, Chas v'sholom, it doesn't mean a new Torah. There is no new Torah. There's only one Torah, and God gave that at Har Sinai. It means new insight in Torah, new understanding in Torah will be revealed that was never known before. And these are the words of Gemara. In the future, in the Medrash, the Holy One, blessed be He, will sit and expound on new Torah, which will be given by Mashiach. That is, will be a tremendous revelation of Torah wisdom that will be considered a new Torah. Again, not Chas v'sholom, new Torah, because all the wisdom that Mashiach will teach and all the Torah that Mashiach will teach has already been given by Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai. The Gemara says that everything you find in Gemara, everything you find in Medrash, every statement made by a real true Torah scholar, if it's really true, it was already given at Sinai. So if it was already given at Mount Sinai, then what's new about it? And the answer is it was given, but it was included in some general principles. It's like when you study science or math. You learn a certain theory in science or a certain principle of math, but it doesn't mean that you worked out all its applications. So there's the principle. That principle includes all the details, and all the details depend on that principle. So they're included in the principle, but when you just study the principle itself, you might not know the details. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so the same thing is here. Everything was already given in the Torah, just like the 10 Commandments. There's only 10, but includes the whole Torah, all the 5 books. And the 5 books include everything that's in Gemara. And the Gemara includes everything and anything that was ever written in the future. So that means there'll be new wisdom. What's this new wisdom? How can there be new wisdom? You learn the laws like this week. The 7th year is Shemitah, the 50th year is the Jubilee year. We know all the things you're supposed to do. So the answer is, the new wisdom will be deeper understanding. The Torah will consist of 2 parts. No, the Torah consists of 2 parts. The esoteric secrets of Torah. Today, yeah.
Wouldn't you say that because we're going to be on a higher level, and we'll have new challenges on our, because our souls will, like, the way we look like will sort of be on a higher level, wouldn't you say there will be new halacha based on our new way of living and new perspective?
There is something about that, and not exactly the way you said it, but I would say based on new circumstances, because Mashiach will be in certain circumstances will be different, and certain halachas might be changed because of that, because the Torah doesn't change. Remember we said that in Torah there's no change. Even though there's so many changes, there's no change. Why? Because all the changes are based on certain principles. Like we gave the example, if a person is sick and the doctor says you're not allowed to fast, that's not considered changing the Torah. And if he goes to the Rav, and the Rav says, what did the doctor say? You're not allowed to? I'm ruling for you that you don't have to fast. You're not allowed to fast on Yom Kippur. He didn't change the Torah. He's basically applying the Torah to this person's personal circumstances.
But I guess another question I have is, because a lot of laws and minhagim and stuff were interpreted by rabbis, and there's lots of different opinions. When we have clarity on the right way to do something,
Right.
and maybe even something that was interpreted incorrectly, we'll be doing it correctly, or I don't really.
Right. So that's a good question. Maybe remind me on Friday, we need more time to go into it, because there is something like it, but it's not about correct and incorrect, but it's like I said before, circumstances change. So it might be that now the halacha was one way, and then the halacha will be different. The famous example of that is Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel.
Yeah.
Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are two famous sages that they had difference of opinion about a number of things. And whenever there's a difference of opinion, we rule, the halacha is like Beis Hillel. It says when Mashiach comes, the halacha in those areas will be like Beis Shammai. How can the Torah change? And this is the answer. The Torah will not change, but circumstances change. And when circumstances change, the application of the halacha is different. If somebody's, God forbid, well, I'll say somebody's sick, a woman has to give birth. Not only you're allowed to call an ambulance and rush to the hospital, you have to desecrate Shabbos and do everything to get her medical care that she needs. And it's not that the Torah changed because she's in certain circumstances. Under these circumstances, the halacha, the application of the halacha is different.
So Hillel and who?
Shammai. These are two famous names in Gemara, Hillel and Shammai. In fact, most of the sages in Gemara belong to these two schools, either the Hillel school or the Shammai school. And they were known that in general, Hillel was more lenient in halacha and Shammai was more strict in halacha. So in a lot of areas, Shammai would say, you have to pay. Hillel would say, you're exempt from paying. Shammai would say, this is not kosher. Hillel would say, it is kosher. Shammai would say that, the school of Shammai would say that this is considered impure, and the school of Hillel would say it's considered pure. Most of the time, that's the way it is. So now when there is a situation like that, the ruling is, and that's another discussion, what is it based on? The ruling is like Hillel. Mashiach will come, the ruling will be like Shammai. So getting back to this, just to give brief explanation, what does it mean that Mashiach will teach new insight? So I need more time to do this, but I'm going to try to do fast forward and do the best I can in the 10 minutes we have. And if we need more time, maybe we'll continue on Friday. The Gemara says that there's a Gemara that says that when this sage passed away, it was the end of a certain era. He was exceptional in a certain way. And when he passed, no longer did people have the ability to do things they could do before. And this sage, when he passed away, it was the end of another era. And when that sage passed away, it was the end of a different era. One of the sages is Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Meir, when he passed away, that was the end of the era of people that gave parables and metaphors. This is the same person, Rabbi Meir Balanes, right? So the Gemara says, in fact, he gave 300 parables. The Gemara says, we only know and remember 3 of them. And I only remember 2 of the 3. But I remember 2 of the 3. A parable means, let me give you an example. There was a fox who was approached a well, and he climbed up and looked down, and he sees in the water something white. What do you think it was? It was a reflection of the moon. But he thought it was some delicious cheese. So he jumped into the bucket, went all the way down, very disappointed to see it's only water. And now he can't get out. After being there for a while, frustrated, another animal pokes his head over the well and says, hey, what's down there? So the fox, who's a sly fox, says, you can't believe what this cheese is like. You've never tasted anything like this in your life. So the other animal says, how can I get there? So the fox says, jump into the other bucket and that'll take you down. What happens when he jumps into the other bucket and goes down? The fox goes up. He went up and he jumped out. That's the story. So on the surface, it's a nice, cute little story. You can have it in the second grade storybooks. But the Gemara said this was a metaphor for some deep wisdom. The second one was also with a fox. That a fox passed a vineyard and went to go in to eat the grapes, but the space between one stick and another, and the gate was too narrow. So the fox fasted for 3 days, became skinny, and went right through, and he had a feast, and he ate, and he ate, and he ate, and he ate. Then he wanted to go out. He's so fat, he can't go out again. So he had to fast again, and after he fasted, he went through the space, and he got out. Another story. And then there's a third one. So what does it mean that when he passed away, there are no more metaphors? I think anyone in this room, if I would say to you, okay, we learned something in class, I'm giving you an hour, create a metaphor to explain it. You think you'd have such a hard time? It's not so hard. God is the king and the Jewish people are the queen, and we make a story that fits. This is the husband, this is the wife. So the explanation is metaphor, these kind of metaphors we can all make. When the Gemara says that, it means something else. Generally speaking, these were people who were geniuses, giants in Torah and in wisdom, very deep, deep minds. And when they understood things, they understood it on such a deep level, it was so abstract and so deep that it was almost impossible for them to communicate what they understand to their students. So therefore, they had to present it to their students in a more simple way and water it down so their students should be able to grasp it. Because if they would communicate to their students what they understand, it would be too much. They would be overwhelmed. It was just too deep. Sometimes the concept is so deep that no matter how much this teacher of Torah would make an effort to sort of simplify it, bring it down, water it down, say it in simple words, no matter what you do, there's nothing you can say to communicate this to those students. It's too deep. And the only alternative is that he has to present it in the form of a story, of a metaphor. And that's something that everybody could understand. But in this metaphor, there's so much depth there that the student will later look deeper into the metaphor and figure out, this is this, and that's this message, that's another message. So therefore, the purpose of the metaphor is a way to communicate a very deep, abstract concept that it's impossible to communicate in its purest form. Did anyone in this class ever learn about the difference between Chokhmah and Bina in the intellect?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you communicate that to a 3-year-old?
Eventually.
You mean after 10 years or so when they turn 13? There's certain things that are just so abstract, you can't communicate that to a 3-year-old. You can say words, they won't know what you're talking about. And the only way, if you want to communicate, is you have to say certain words, certain things. They'll hear the words, they can repeat the words. Maybe when they get older, they'll look deeper into it and they'll understand. And that's what a real metaphor is. And that's what the Gemara says. Once Rabbi Meir passed away, there were no longer people that were on such a level of depth of wisdom that they needed a metaphor in order to communicate their concepts. I'm giving you an example. I'm soon getting there. So what does it mean that he said 300 metaphors? It doesn't mean he made up 300 little stories. What if the person is so deep and so abstract that even the metaphor is too difficult for the student to understand? So he needs a metaphor to explain the metaphor.
Oh my gosh.
And what if that's too deep? So he needs a metaphor to explain the metaphor that explains the metaphor. And that's what the Gemara is saying about Rabbi Meir. Not that he said 300 stories, that his brain was so deep and he understood things on such an abstract level, we have no concept, that he needed 300 metaphors to communicate what he understands to other people. In other words, what he gives over, there are 300 layers of depth to the concept. Now we understand another thing. There's a verse, a pasuk in Kohelet. Kohelet has the metaphors of King Salman, Shlomo Melech. And it says that he said, and he gave over 3,000 metaphors. Okay, so if you're smarter, you can make 3,000 stories. I'll give you a year, you'll sit down, you can make up 3,000 stories. No, it means the same thing. His brain was so much deeper than Rabbi Meir that when he had to communicate a concept, he needed a metaphor to the metaphor, for the metaphor, for the metaphor, until he could understand 3,000 metaphors to communicate what he wants to communicate to the people in his generation who are much smarter than the people in our generation. Why am I saying all this? The same is with Torah. If Torah is Hashem's wisdom, so you open up the Chumash, this is Hashem's wisdom, that Rachel did this, and Leah did that, and Yosef did, and the brothers sold him. I mean, it's nice stories, but this is the wisdom of God, who's the infinite creator of the universe. And the answer is, in a sense, the Torah is like a metaphor. There's so not that the physical things didn't happen, but there's much deeper depth to every single story and every single line, every single word in the Torah. If King Salman, a human being, needed 3,000 metaphors to explain what he understands, how much more Hashem himself? So that means clearly in the Torah there's infinite depth because it's coming from an infinite God. And that's what it means when Mashiach comes, he'll teach us new insight. Hashem, just like Hashem revealed the Torah through Moshe, then Hashem will reveal new depth of Torah through Mashiach, and even those Torah scholars, like Moshe Rabbeinu and Rabbi Akiva and all the great scholars, Rambam, all those from all generations, will learn new insight in Torah, which they didn't learn before, because the Torah is infinite. And the wisdom is infinite, because it comes from a God that's infinite. And that's what called the teachings of Torah of Mashiach. And that's why we call it, it's new, not Chaz v'Shalom, new, nothing new. It's all included in the Torah that was given at Har Sinai, but it's new insight that was never known before. Okay, to be continued. You're welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So I'm going to do this Friday again. I want to go through the whole list. As far as we see now, we stopped at number what? We stopped number 21. Okay.